What do you do when your own brother sells your inheritance behind your back? Aurora had always believed the farmhouse, her grandfather's legacy, was safe. But when Caius, her younger brother, casually informed her he had sold it for a fraction of its value, everything changed. Enraged but determined, Aurora rushed home only to discover that the real farm hadn't been sold. The betrayal, however, ran deeper than just the property. Stay tuned to find out how Aurora plans to take back what's rightfully hers, and don't forget to subscribe for more compelling stories. My younger brother secretly sold my $10 million farmhouse for just $4 million and called me, his voice casual, almost smug. "I spent all the money on my girlfriend's business. She needed it more than you." I froze, my mind spinning. Without a second thought, I canceled my trip and rushed home. But when I arrived, I just smiled. Because the farmhouse Caius sold wasn't the real one. I never thought I'd return to Grandfather Silas's farm like this. But life has a way of dragging you back to places you never planned on seeing again, especially when betrayal forces your hand. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, right as I was wrapping up a research report on sustainable irrigation techniques in my Denver office. My phone buzzed, and I almost ignored it until I saw the name, Caius. We hadn't spoken much in the past few years. He was always chasing his next business idea, and I was too buried in my work to get involved in family matters, but something in my gut told me to answer. "Aurora," Caius's voice was smug, too casual. "I figure I should let you know. I sold the farm." For a moment, I thought I misheard. "You what? The farm? Grandpa's farm?" "Got $4 million for it," he said, as if it was just another deal, nothing more than a piece of property. Not the place where we spent childhood summers, where Grandfather Silas had built his entire life's work. My hand gripped the phone, my knuckles white. "You sold it without even talking to me?" Caius sighed, clearly annoyed. "Come on, Aurora. You haven't set foot on that land in years. You're too busy with your fancy scientist life in Denver. The farm was just sitting there collecting dust." The anger surged in my chest. "You had no right to do that, Caius." He laughed sharp, careless. "Actually, I did. I was named executor. That means I get to make the calls." My mind spun, the words barely registering. "Where's the money?" A pause. Then the smirk in his voice was clear. Spent it." I went cold. "What do you mean, you spent it?" "My girlfriend, Olivia, her business needed a boost," Caius explained, as if it was perfectly reasonable. "She had this amazing investment opportunity, and she needed funds fast. I helped her out." I felt the air leave my lungs. "You sold our grandfather's farm for a third of its real value and blew the money on Olivia's business?" "She needed it more than you," Caius shot back, defensive. "You don't need the money, Aurora. You've got your career, your fancy research projects. What do you care about an old farm?" I ended the call before I could speak, the rage boiling over, choking me. Within an hour, I'd booked the next flight to Austin, Texas. The entire flight, my mind raced. How could Caius do this? He'd always been reckless, but this wasn't just bad judgment. This was theft. By the time I landed, my anger had hardened into something more dangerous: determination. He thought he could get away with it, but he didn't know one thing. Grandfather Silas wasn't a fool, and I had a feeling he'd seen this coming. When I arrived at the farm, or what was left of it, a wave of emotions hit me like a tidal wave. Memories flooded back summer mornings feeding the horses, the smell of fresh soil after a rainstorm, the sound of Grandfather's laughter echoing from the front porch. Now, the land was abandoned, overgrown, the heart of our family sold like it was nothing. I needed answers. And there was only one person who could give them to me: Finch Bennett, Grandfather's longtime lawyer. Finch Bennett was waiting when I arrived at his Dallas office the next morning. He looked up from his desk as I entered, his sharp eyes filled with something close to expectation. "I was wondering when you'd show up, Aurora," he said, gesturing for me to sit. I didn't waste time. "Caius sold the farm without my consent. He says he had the right." Finch sighed, tapping his fingers against a thick folder on his desk. "Yes, I received the notice yesterday." I stared at him. "So that's it? He wins?" Finch gave a small smile.
That depends.
Have you read your grandfather's final estate documents? A strange feeling stirred in my chest. I read the will. It left everything to both of us, but Caius was executor. Finch nodded. That's true, but your grandfather was a very careful man. He slid the folder toward me. 2 weeks before he passed, he filed an amended deed. I hesitated before opening it. The first page immediately caught my eye. Character clause, I read aloud. Finch's expression turned serious. Silas knew Caius's weaknesses. He loved him, but he didn't trust him with the farm. So he added a safeguard. If either of you attempted to sell the farm without the other's agreement, ownership would immediately and irrevocably transfer to the wronged party. I blinked. Are you saying... Finch leaned back in his chair. The sale is void. The farm is yours, Aurora. A mix of relief and shock washed over me. Caius doesn't know about this, does he? Finch shook his head. No, and I'd advise not telling him until we call a legal meeting. I sat back, trying to process it all. Grandfather Silas had known. He had seen Caius's recklessness, his greed, and he had planned for it. I clenched my fists. So what now? Finch checked his watch. Now you get ready, because once Caius finds out, he's going to fight this. And something tells me he's not going down without a scene. That evening, I drove back to the farm. I stood on the overgrown land, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the empty fields. This farm wasn't just land, it was my grandfather's legacy. It was everything he had built, everything he had left behind, and Caius had tried to throw it away for a quick payout and a selfish dream. I pulled out my phone. Tomorrow, Caius would learn the truth. He thought he had won. He had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind racing with everything that was about to happen. Caius had no idea that his so-called victory was about to collapse right in front of him, and knowing my brother, he wasn't going to take it well. By 10:00 a.m., I was sitting across from Finch Bennett in his office. He had already arranged a legal meeting, ensuring Caius and his lawyer would be present. I could tell Finch had seen plenty of messy family disputes in his career. But this was personal. Caius arrived 20 minutes late, of course. He strolled in like he owned the place, dressed in an expensive suit that he probably paid for with money he had no right to touch. Olivia followed behind him, her expression set in boredom, clearly annoyed at having to be here. His lawyer, a nervously looking man barely out of law school, shuffled in behind them, looking overwhelmed. Caius smirked the second he saw me. Wow, Aurora. Didn't think you'd care enough to show up. I ignored the jab and gestured toward the empty chair across from me. Sit down, Caius. Caius flopped into the chair with an exaggerated sigh. Let's make this quick. I've got better things to do. Finch cleared his throat, ignoring the attitude. Caius, I assume you're aware that Aurora has concerns regarding the sale of your grandfather's farm. Caius rolled his eyes, leaning back. We've been over this. I was the executor. I had every legal right to sell the property. Finch calmly slid a document across the table. Actually, you didn't. Caius frowned but picked it up. As his eyes scanned the words, his smug expression faded. The arrogance drained from his face, and his hands tightened around the paper. For the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Real fear. What is this? His voice wasn't as confident anymore. Finch steeled his fingers. That is the amended deed your grandfather filed 2 weeks before his passing. It contains a character clause stating that if one of his grandchildren attempted to sell the farm without the other's consent, ownership would automatically and irrevocably transfer to the wronged party. Caius's face paled. No, that can't be right. Oh, but it is, I said, my voice steady. The moment you signed that sale agreement, you lost everything. The farm belongs to me now. Caius slammed the document on the table. This is a setup, he snapped. Grandpa wouldn't do this to me. Finch remained calm. Silas Carter knew his grandchildren well, Caius. He knew Aurora would protect the farm, and he knew you well. Let's just say he anticipated your actions. Caius turned to his lawyer, his voice frantic. Do something. The young man shifted in his seat uncomfortably. Legally speaking, the amendment is binding. The sale is void. Olivia crossed her arms, her voice sharp. So what does that mean? The money is gone? We already spent it. That's your problem, I said, my tone icy cold. Caius's face twisted in frustration as he pushed away from the table and stood up. You can't just take everything from me! I met his glare. I didn't take it. You threw it away. A heavy silence stretched through the room. Caius had lost completely. Finch sighed and slid another document forward. There's one more issue. As executor, you had a legal duty to uphold the estate's integrity. By selling the farm without Aurora's consent, you violated those duties. He tapped the paper. Effective immediately, you are removed as executor. Caius stared at the paper like it was a death sentence. You're joking. Nope, I said, leaning forward. I'm in charge now. Olivia suddenly stood, grabbing Caius's arm. Caius, we need to go. Caius stood frozen, his gaze still fixed on the document in his hands. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He had lost everything. The farm, the money, the control. Everything he'd worked for was slipping through his fingers. But Finch wasn't finished. He picked up another file, his voice cold and calculated. One last thing. Since the sale is void, that means you owe the estate every dollar you received from it. Caius visibly swallowed, the weight of it all settling on his chest. I don't have the money. I leaned back in my chair, my gaze never leaving him. Then we have a problem, don't we? Olivia, clearly seething with fury, yanked on Caius's arm again. Caius, we're leaving! But before they could escape, Finch's voice sliced through the tension. Oh, and Caius, he called, his shoulders tight with the tension in the room. Any attempt to challenge this legally will result in a full estate audit. Finch's tone was calm, but it held an undeniable weight. That means every financial transaction you made as executor will be investigated. Caius's jaw clenched. He knew exactly what Finch meant. Every shady deal, every dollar funneled into Olivia's business would be laid bare for all to see. Caius didn't speak. He just stormed out, Olivia's heels clicking sharply against the floor, echoing his fury. The door slammed behind them. I finally let out a breath, but it didn't feel like victory, not yet. That night, I sat alone on Grandfather Silas's old porch, staring out at the land. The cool Texas air wrapped around me, but I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in my gut. I should have felt relief after all. The farm was mine now, legally and forever. But something about Caius's desperation troubled me. He was reckless, yes, but he wasn't stupid. He had to have known this was a possibility. He had to have known that Grandfather Silas would have planned for this moment. So why was he so desperate? My phone buzzed, dragging me from my thoughts. It was a text from Caius. We need to talk. I stared at the message, my stomach twisting. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. I let the words sit there for a while. A part of me wanted to ignore it. I had won after all. The farm was legally mine, and Caius had lost every ounce of control. But I knew him too well. Caius didn't just walk away, not without a backup plan. Finally, I typed, meet me at the farmhouse, 1 hour. By the time I arrived, the sky had darkened, and the air smelled thick with damp earth, the kind of scent that always came before a storm. The land stretched out in front of me, abandoned and forgotten fences still broken, crops overgrown. It was clear the place had been neglected for far too long. Caius's SUV rolled up 10 minutes late, its headlights cutting through the shadows. He stepped out slowly, his posture slumped, looking different this time, tired, nervous. Olivia wasn't with him. For once, it was just the two of us. He shoved his hands into his pockets, avoiding my gaze. You got what you wanted. I leaned against the porch railing, watching him carefully. Did I? Caius let out a bitter laugh, the sound cold and hollow. Spare me the lecture, Aurora. You think you're the hero in all this? He gestured toward the land, the pain and frustration evident in his eyes. You left. You had your career, your research, your perfect life. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who took care of everything. I tilted my head, studying him with a mix of pity and frustration. You didn't take care of anything, Caius. You sold Grandfather's farm for a quick payday, and you burned through the money like it was nothing. His jaw tightened. I was trying to build something. I crossed my arms. And where is it now? He didn't answer, and that told me everything. Something in my gut twisted. Caius, this isn't just about the farm, is it? He hesitated, his eyes darting away, and for the first time in a long time, I saw it. Fear. I stepped closer. How bad is it? Caius ran a hand through his hair, looking anywhere but at me. I borrowed against grandfather's other accounts. I felt my stomach drop. What? He exhaled sharply. The estate's tax accounts, the maintenance funds, the savings, everything. I pulled from them thinking I could pay it back before anyone noticed. No, his voice cracked. But the investment tanked. The developer went bankrupt, and now... He let out a hollow laugh. Now it's gone. I felt physically sick. How much? His voice barely rose above a whisper. $750,000. The world tilted for a second. I pressed my fingers against my forehead, forcing myself to think. So that's why you were so desperate to sell the farm? Caius nodded, looking miserable. I thought I could fix it before anyone found out. I closed my eyes. And Olivia? His laugh was humorless. She left, took what little she could, and ran the second she realized there was nothing left. A long silence stretched between us. I should have walked away. I should have told Caius this was his mess to fix. But then I thought of Grandfather Silas, of the way he had always believed in second chances. And despite everything, Caius was still my brother. I pulled out my phone and dialed Finch. He answered on the second ring. I need to see you, I said. Now. An hour later, Caius and I sat in Finch's office. Finch, unshaken as always, didn't seem surprised when I told him everything. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. Your grandfather knew this was a possibility, Finch said, sliding the file toward me. So he planned for it. I flipped through the pages, my heart racing. Insurance policies, financial safeguards, legal contingencies, things Grandfather Silas had set up long before he passed. Finch tapped one document. This is an insurance policy covering unauthorized estate investments. If triggered, it allows for recovery of up to $800,000. Caius let out a breath like he'd been punched. So we're covered? Finch's gaze hardened. Not exactly. There are conditions. Caius braced himself. Of course there are. Finch leaned forward. First, you must sign an official admission of wrongdoing. That means formally acknowledging your misuse of estate funds. Caius stiffened. And if I don't? Finch's face didn't change. Then Aurora will have no choice but to file a legal claim against you, which would trigger a full forensic audit of the estate's finances. He paused. Given the evidence, it's likely you'd be charged with fraud. Caius's face drained of color. Fraud? Yes, Finch said simply. And that would mean prison time. Caius's hand shook slightly as he wiped it over his face. And the other conditions? Finch folded his hands. You will be required to attend financial counseling at your own expense, and you will have no further involvement in the estate, ever. Caius turned to me. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was almost pleading. And you're okay with this? I held his gaze. I don't want to see you in prison, Caius, but I'm not going to protect you from the consequences of what you did. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he nodded. Fine. Finch slid the admission document forward. Caius took the pen with shaking hands and signed. And just like that, it was over. We stepped outside into the night air. Caius stood by his car, staring out at the city skyline. I don't know what to do now, he admitted. I hesitated before answering. You start over. Caius let out a weak laugh. How? I sighed, studying him. The brother I had grown up with, the one who had lost himself chasing the wrong things. The farm still needs fixing, I said after a pause. You could help. His head snapped toward me, eyes wide with surprise. You'd let me? I met his gaze. You're still my brother, Caius. But this isn't about money anymore. If you want a second chance, you have to earn it. He didn't answer right away, but after a long pause, he nodded. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to fix what was broken. The days following my meeting with Finch were heavy, weighed down by the silence and the aftermath of everything that had unfolded. For so long, I had been consumed by anger towards Caius, convinced that he would never change. But standing there with him now, seeing him humbled, uncertain, and lost, it felt strange. And yet, there we were, side by side, on Grandfather Silas's farm, staring at the overgrown fields, the broken fences, and the house that had once been filled with laughter and life. "I barely recognize it," Caius muttered, his voice low. I glanced at him, my eyes tracing the same view. "Yeah, well, that's what happens when someone tries to sell a place instead of taking care of it." Caius exhaled sharply but didn't argue. He wasn't fighting anymore, and for the first time in years, I could see a change in him, a shift that I couldn't ignore. We spent the next week clearing out the old barn, repairing fences, and assessing the damage that came from years of neglect and bad choices. Caius wasn't accustomed to this kind of labor, and at first he struggled. But he showed up every morning, never once complaining. One evening, after a long day spent fixing the porch steps, I found him sitting on the front steps, staring out over the land as the sun sank below the horizon. The golden light stretched across the fields, casting long shadows over the same land that Grandfather Silas had cherished. "I used to hate this place," Caius said quietly, his voice hesitant, almost unsure. I thought it was a trap, a constant reminder of everything I didn't want to be. I sat down beside him, wiping the sweat from my forehead. "And now?" He was silent for a long moment, then sighed deeply. "Now I think I get it. Grandpa wasn't trying to hold us back. He was giving us something that actually mattered." I nodded, watching the wind ripple through the tall grass. "He always thought 5 moves ahead." Caius chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah, and I never thought past the next dollar sign." The months that followed settled into a rhythm of hard work and quiet realizations. Caius stuck with it, something I honestly hadn't expected. At first, I kept my guard up, waiting for him to give up, to run when things got difficult. But he didn't. He learned how to fix the equipment, how to plant crops properly, how to tend to the land like Grandfather had. Slowly, I realized something. He wasn't just doing it for me. He was doing it for himself. One afternoon, we stood in the middle of the restored barn, the scent of fresh hay in the air. Caius wiped his hands on his jeans and glanced around. "It actually looks like a real farm again." "That's because it is," I replied. He let out a deep breath, nodding. "Feels different." I studied him for a moment. "You feel different." Caius hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah." And for the first time, I believed him. A year after everything had fallen apart, we held a ceremony in Grandfather Silas's honor. We invited neighbors, old friends, and the few people in town who had known him well. Caius stood beside me as we unveiled a memorial plaque near the farmhouse. It simply read, "Silas Carter, a man who built more than land." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft glow over the farm, I realized something. Grandfather had always planned for this, not just for the land or the money, but for us. He knew that Caius and I would never truly see eye to eye until something forced us to. He'd put in safeguards anticipating Caius's weaknesses, but he had also left the door open for redemption, and Caius had finally stepped through it. Later that night, after the guests had gone home, I found Caius sitting on the porch, staring up at the stars. "Still thinking about running back to Austin?" I asked, a hint of a smile playing on my lips. He smirked. "Nah, turns out I like the quiet." I sat down beside him, letting the cool night air settle around us. After a while, Caius asked, "Do you think Grandfather knew this would happen?" I thought for a moment, then answered, "Yeah, I think he knew exactly what he was doing." Caius sighed, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah, me too." And for the first time in a long while, we sat there not as enemies, not as rivals, but as brothers. What do you do when the person you trusted most betrays you in the worst way possible? When your own flesh and blood sells what's left of your family's legacy for a fraction of its value? And yet, even after the betrayal, you find yourself standing face to face with them, wondering if there's any way to rebuild what was broken. Aurora never imagined that she'd have to fight her own brother for the family farm. Caius thought he could sell their grandfather's legacy for a quick payday, using the money to fuel his reckless ambitions. But he didn't count on one thing: Aurora wasn't about to let him destroy everything their grandfather had worked for. And when she found out about the legal safeguard her grandfather had put in place, it was game over for Caius. But it didn't end with a legal victory. Aurora, despite everything, gave her brother the chance to redeem himself, to do the hard work of fixing what he'd broken, and Caius surprisingly took it. Slowly, he began to change, no longer focused on quick gains, but on something real, on building something that mattered. So here's the question: would you have given someone like Caius a second chance? Or would you have walked away, knowing that their actions had consequences they needed to face? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
The phone call that shattered my perception of my husband came on an ordinary Tuesday evening. I was in the kitchen putting the final touches on Elise's 7th birthday cake when I heard Declan's raised voice seeping through the crack in his study door. "I don't care what it takes, Davis. Just make sure those documents disappear before the feds get a hold of them," he growled in a tone I didn't recognize. "We're talking millions on the line here. Do whatever you have to." My heart pounded as I strained to make out the muffled response on the other end of the line. When had my loving husband turned so menacing? Frozen in place, my hands still gripping the piping bag, I tried to rationalize the outburst as stress from work. But that explanation rang hollow as his words replayed in my mind, threats and sums of money so large I couldn't conceptualize them. Just then, Elise bounded into the kitchen in her pajamas, oblivious to the storm brewing down the hall. "Mommy, is the cake ready yet?" she asked, craning her neck up towards the treat on the counter. I forced a smile, not wanting to frighten her. "Almost, baby. Why don't you go pick out a movie for us to watch together?" Squealing with delight, she scurried off to the living room, while I stood paralyzed, my gut twisting with dread. Who was this volatile man I thought I knew so well, the same person I'd built a life with over the last decade? Moments later, Declan sauntered into the kitchen, smoothing his tousled hair back into place as he approached. Before I could confront him about the call, he pulled me into an embrace, planting a kiss on my forehead. "Smells delicious, babe," he said, eyeing the sugary concoction. "Can't wait to see the look on Ellie's face tomorrow." I clung to him desperately, searching his warm brown eyes for any flicker of the rage I'd heard moments ago. But his expression remained tender and serene as ever, as if that disturbing call had been merely a terrible dream. My instincts warned me something was askew, but I questioned myself. Could I completely upend our family on a few overheard fragments, no matter how alarming? Pushing the nagging doubts aside for the moment, I smiled up at him. "She's going to be so thrilled. Maybe we could kick off her big day with a horseback riding lesson like she's been asking." Declan chuckled, smoothing my hair from my face. "Anything for my 2 favorite girls." That night, as I gazed at him snoring peacefully beside me, I knew our cozy world was on the precipice of crumbling. My husband, my rock, my partner of 10 years, had a sinister secret. And I realized with gut-wrenching certainty that unraveling it would be the only way to truly know the man I'd once trusted with every fiber of my being. Over the next few weeks, Declan's behavior only grew more erratic and disturbing. Simple things, like his work stories not adding up or a detached demeanor when playing with Elise, raised red flags I could no longer ignore. One night after tucking Elise in, I decided to finally confront him about the suspicious call. "Honey, can we talk?" He looked up from his laptop, brow furrowed. "What's up?" Taking a deep breath, I recounted what I'd overheard that fateful evening, the hushed threats, the mention of incriminating documents. By the time I finished, his face had drained of color. "You were eavesdropping on my private conversations?" he snapped, slamming the laptop shut. I recoiled at the venom in his tone. "I didn't mean to, I just what? Thought you'd play private investigator on your own husband?" He rose from his chair, towering over me. "Those calls were confidential business matters, not some tawdry affair for you to stick your nose in." Indignation flared within me. "Declan, You were talking about hiding evidence and paying people off. What am I supposed to think? His jaw tightened. You're supposed to trust that I'd never do anything to jeopardize this family. But I see now that was a mistake. With that, he brushed past me and stormed out of the room, leaving me shaken and utterly adrift. Was the man I loved truly capable of such sinister deeds? The next day, the local news provided a chilling answer. Declan's employer, an investment firm downtown, was under federal investigation for fraud and embezzlement. Reeling from the revelation, I scrolled through the damning coverage, each breathless report more lurid than the last. That's when Elise wandered into the room, amber eyes wide. "Mommy, why are they saying such mean things about Daddy's work on TV?" I scrambled to find reassuring words, but she seemed to read the worry etched on my face. "Don't worry," she said, lowering her voice to a whisper. "Daddy told me not to talk about his secret meetings at home or he'll get really mad. But I won't say anything, I promise." My blood turned to ice in my veins as her innocent words detonated the final shred of doubt. My husband, my daughter's hero, was not only mixed up in illicit corporate schemes, but forcing a 7-year-old to cover up for his misdeeds. Rage engulfed me, burning hotter with every ragged breath until I could scarcely see straight. That evening, while Declan sat fuming in the den, I scoured his study for any trace of evidence to confirm my darkest suspicions. In his desk drawer, buried beneath reams of financial reports, I found a disposable prepaid phone, likely the device he'd used to make those cryptic calls. But it was the sheaf of documents underneath that made my heart plummet into my gut. Emails, incriminating spreadsheets, offshore bank statements, all leading an unmistakable trail back to Declan's role in pillaging funds and defrauding clients. The confidential business matters he'd raged about were nothing more than a litany of high-stakes crimes designed to bankroll our luxurious lifestyle. My hands trembled as I clutched the documents, the realm of plausible deniability evaporating like a noxious gas. The man I'd loved, the father of my child, was a con man, teetering on the edge of sheer criminality, and he'd willingly entangled our entire family in his web of deceit. With the damning evidence clutched in my hands, I knew I had to confront Declan again, no matter how explosive the fallout. As I marched into the den, resolution steeled my nerves against the fear bubbling in my gut. "We need to talk, now." I slapped the incriminating papers onto his desk, scattering them across the polished mahogany surface. His head whipped up, eyes widening as he registered the disclosed secrets. "Where did you get those?" he growled, shoving his chair back with a harsh screech. "From your locked desk drawer, the one with all your little secrets tucked away." I crossed my arms, holding his seething gaze. I knew those calls were more than just confidential business, but this... God, Declan, how could you get mixed up in something so blatantly illegal? In a blur of motion, he shot to his feet and closed the distance between us, fists clenched. "You had no right going through my private things," he roared, spittle flying as his face flushed crimson. "Those documents are part of an active federal case. You stupid woman. Do you have any idea what kind of trouble you could bring down on this family?" I stood my ground, crushing down the urge to flinch. "The only one bringing trouble is you and your shady Wall Street dealings. What about our daughter, huh? How does getting her trapped in your sordid web of fraud not eating you up inside?" Declan's hardened expression faltered, the slightest crack forming in his rage mask. "Elise?" He sank back onto the couch, dragging a hand down his face. "You think I don't agonize over putting you both at risk? Those spreadsheets, those accounts, that was all to secure a future for our family, babe. A future better than anything my old man could scrape together with his deadbeat salary." I scoffed bitterly at his attempts to rationalize the unforgivable. "And having your little girl lie for you, keep your criminal secrets, how does that noble motive fit into your twisted plans?" A muscle ticked in his jaw as we faced off in tense silence, the weight of his innumerable transgressions pressing down like a shroud. Just as I opened my mouth to unleash another fusillade, a tiny voice piped up from the doorway. "Mommy? Daddy?" Elise lingered on the threshold in her flannel nightgown, eyes swollen from crying. I had another bad dream about the monsters. My heart shattered into pieces as realization washed over me with brutal clarity. In her childlike innocence, she'd unconsciously represented the darkness pervading her own home. The true monsters weren't a fantasy, but the very man tasked with protecting her. Declan softened for a fleeting moment, lifting his arms as if to embrace our daughter. But as soon as Elise shrank back, that tender facade crumpled, his face contorting in a foul leer. "Get out, Elise," he spat with repulsive venom. "This is grown-up talk, and you've stuck your nose where it doesn't belong for far too long already." Before I could react, he snatched a paperweight from the desk and hurled it at the terrified girl. It struck the doorframe mere inches from her head, shards of glass detonating in all directions as she released a blood-curdling wail. "Declan, you psychopath!" I screeched, shoving him back as he advanced on the sobbing child. "Get away from her!" Gathering Elise into my arms, I fled the den in blind panic, my little girl's desperate cries echoing through the cavernous home that had once shielded us so lovingly. Behind the mahogany doors, Declan's own monstrous roars reverberated like some demonic force unleashed. As I clutched my baby to my chest, her warmth the only solace from the horror, one certainty crystallized amid the chaos. Whatever the cost, I had to extract us from this nightmare before his swirling malevolence consumed us both. The morning after Declan's violent outburst, a heavy pall hung over our once idyllic home. Elise clung to me like a second skin, whimpering at the slightest creak or groan of the old house. My own heart raced with each unexplained thump, half expecting my unhinged husband to come raging through the door at any moment. By the time the pale winter light seeped through the curtains, I could no longer abide the sickening tension. I had to regain some semblance of control over this rapidly fracturing situation. Steeling my nerves, I tucked Elise into the living room with her favorite movies before creeping down the hall toward Declan's study. The door was ajar, the room beyond disheveled from our cataclysmic fight the previous evening. Books and papers were strewn about, the heavy crystal paperweight lying in a shower of glittering shards, a silent herald of the violence that had shattered our domestic peace. Bracing myself, I nudged the door open farther and stepped inside. Declan sat hunched behind the desk, nursing a crystal tumbler of amber liquid. His shirt hung untucked, his normally immaculate hair disheveled. At the sound of my footsteps, his bloodshot eyes flicked up with a chilling cynicism. "So," he began, vowels thick and slurred, "the self-righteous princess has emerged to cast judgment on her monstrous husband." I battled to keep my voice from wavering. "Declan, we need to talk about last night." "About your treacherous snooping?" he snarled, slamming his palm on the desk and making me flinch. "About throwing away everything we've built with your childish tantrums?" My mouth set in a grim line as I fought the urge to recoil from his acidic vitriol. This poisonous version of the man I married couldn't be reasoned with, not until I exposed the root of his malice. "If you think protecting our family means terrorizing our daughter, then yes, we have a serious problem," I shot back, unflinching. "Those business dealings you claim were a means to an end? Those were criminal acts, Declan. Fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. And you forced Elise to cover for your shady tracks." To my shock, a cruel chuckle rumbled from his throat as he knocked back another swig of his drink. "You want to talk crimes, princess? Let's start with your flagrant violation of attorney-client privilege when you rifled through those documents. That's what, 3 years in the slammer right there?" As the words slithered from his mouth, a glacial chill gripped me. In his twisted reality, I was the criminal for uncovering his misdeeds. "Not to mention my future earning potential, you've utterly decimated with your self-righteous crusade," he continued with a disturbing calm, rising from his chair to stalk closer. "You think your paltry pay uploading stock photos even qualifies as providing for this family? Without my income stream, we're left with what? That flea-bag cottage your deadbeat dad left you in his estate." My insides reeled from the verbal onslaught as he towered over me, the scent of whiskey and stale cologne invading my senses. Though I longed to flee from the unstable fire raging in his eyes, something stronger took root, a primal instinct to protect my child from this inexplicable darkness. "You're delusional, Declan," I managed through gritted teeth, willing my hands to remain steady. "After everything you've done, jeopardizing Elise's well-being, you think you have any claim over providing for us? You're going to jail, you sick bastard, even if I have to make sure of it myself." At those words, any vestiges of the man I'd once loved contorted into a vicious snarl of hatred. His fingers coiled around my throat with preternatural strength as he slammed me against the desk, upending papers and trinkets in a deafening clatter. "You sanctimonious bitch!" he bellowed in my face, spittle flying as his forearm crushed my windpipe. "I'll show you delusional!" As Declan's snarling face hovered above me, all reason and humanity extinguished behind his crazed eyes, I felt a cold certainty. This man intended to kill me. I clawed desperately at his vice-like grip, but his forearm remained an inflexible bar across my windpipe. Black spots erupted in my vision as I choked on the scant airflow. In a final burst of adrenaline, I slammed my knee upwards, making sickening contact. Declan recoiled with a guttural groan, his hands flying to his groin as I crumpled to the floor, wheezing in ragged gulps of precious oxygen. "You crazy bitch!" he growled through clenched teeth. "I'll make you regret that." Sensing his fury reigniting, I scrabbled backwards towards the door on all fours, desperate to put distance between us. Just as his hulking form advanced again, little feet pounded up the hallway. "Mommy?" Elise appeared in the doorway, her tiny voice cutting through the chaos. Declan froze, seemingly snapping out of his psychotic trance for a fleeting moment as his gaze fell upon our cowering daughter. She clutched her tattered stuffed bunny to her chest, those soulful amber eyes now marred with terror. In that suspended breath, a profound shift overcame my husband's face, not one of remorse, but eerie calculation as he processed the situation. When he finally spoke, the malice had receded, replaced by a sickening false calm. "It's okay, Princess. Mommy and I were just having a grown-up disagreement." He straightened his rumpled shirt, smoothing back his disheveled hair in a perverse mimicry of composure. "Why don't you go pick out a puzzle for us to do together? Make it a hard one." Elise shrank back uncertainly, her small frame trembling as her gaze flickered between the two of us. But I heard yelling. "Don't question me, Elise," Declan erupted, his failed mask of tranquility shattering like a ceramic vase. "Just do as you're told for once." With a terrified squeak, she scurried away down the hall, no doubt scurrying to the safety of her bedroom to escape his towering presence. Tears burned in my eyes as his cruelty lanced my heart. Once the echo of her footsteps faded, my husband turned his smoldering glare back towards me, his expression morphing into one of chilling resolution. "I don't know what insane game you think you're playing at, Cora." He began in a measured tone that felt more unsettling than his previous rage. "But I'll be damned if I let you take my family away from me, the life I've bled and sacrificed for." He stalked towards his disheveled desk and snatched up his cell phone, thumbs flying over the screen. "What are you doing?" I croaked out, dreading his response. "Calling my lawyers," he replied coldly. "Getting ahead of the shitstorm you've unleashed before you can go broadcasting any more of those corporate secrets you stole." "Those documents prove you're a criminal," I spat, fury reigniting within my battered body. "Those documents," he countered with a cruel smile, "are inadmissible evidence that I have a right to protect through attorney-client privilege. You violated that sacred trust when you stole them, which my legal team will make sure the courts recognize as a felony." Dread coiled in my stomach as his twisted logic rang terrifyingly true. In my desperation to expose his depravity, had I inadvertently handed him the bullet for my own demise? "So you can either come clean with me, cooperate to fix this damn mess quietly," Declan continued, that reptilian smile never faltering, "or you can take your chances as an accomplice obstructing a federal investigation. Up to you, babe." In that moment, his cellular chirped to life as our bank's number flashed across the screen. With a sardonic wink, my husband raised the device to his ear. "Looks like we need to have a talk about our finances, too." Over the next several days, Declan's callous dominance only tightened its oppressive grip over our household. Once my initial banking passwords were breached, he systematically drained my personal accounts, leaving me financially marooned. "Can't have you siphoning off money for some harebrained escape plot, now can we?" He taunted with a cruel smile, slapping the latest zero-balance statements onto the kitchen counter in front of me. I clenched my fists, rage and hopelessness warring within me like combatants in the Colosseum. Forced into destitution by the very man I'd vowed to love and honor, I had nowhere to turn, No funds to subsidize an escape for Elise and myself. It wasn't long before Declan's smothering control extended far beyond simple finance. His hired legal muscle churned out restraining dictates by the hour. I was prohibited from contacting law enforcement or advocacy services, removing Elise from the premises, even making unauthorized use of the home's amenities. Like a gazelle ensnared in the python's voracious coils, I found every desperate bid for freedom only entrenching me deeper in Declan's meticulously constructed trap. Whenever I tried to slip away for even a private phone call, his hired goons would materialize from the shadows, eyes concealed behind mirrored shades as they blocked my path with crossed arms. All the while, Declan would smirk in the background, secure in the knowledge that I was neutered, utterly impotent. And always lurking at the fringes of this waking nightmare was my innocent little girl, wounded eyes silently pleading for circumstances she couldn't comprehend. My heart shattered every time Elise instinctively shrank from her father's presence, the emotional scars of his violent outbursts now seared into her psyche. At night, I lay awake plotting any conceivable path out of this fresh hell, contacting family, taking out loans, scraping together whatever meager funds I could to finance a clean, evaporative exit. But Declan had foreseen every eventuality, leaving me more cornered than a sewer rat in a flaming baited trap. On the 7th interminable day of this perverted house arrest, I finally accepted the only glimmer of hope was to outmaneuver Declan through guile. As I pretended to drift into yet another fitful rest that evening, I clutched the disposable phone I'd covertly procured like a lifeline. Painstakingly, I tapped out a coded message to the only friend I could still trust, praying she would understand the layered urgency of my desperate plea. If anyone could bail me out of this steadily calcifying prison, it would be Gwen. My thumb hovered over the send button, both elation and trepidation gripping me. One errant movement, one infinitesimal slip-up, and Declan would sniff out my gambit before I could so much as blink. I had one tenuous shot to light the fuse for our potential salvation. No more delaying the inevitable. I punched send, sealing my family's fate. Either freedom beckoned over the horizon, or the merciless anvil would clamp down with finality. For the next 12 hours, I sat vigil in excruciating silence, willing my expression into one of serene obliviousness whenever the pretense of breakfast or Declan's leering presence demanded it. My gut roiled with every unaccounted-for creak, bracing for the inevitable confrontation over my badly concealed transgressions. Just after noon chimed, the Winchester doorbell resounded through the foyer, nearly causing my heart to detonate from my chest cavity. I froze, ears straining, as thudding footsteps and muted voices preceded the study door banging open. "What is the meaning of this?" Declan roared as 3 grim-faced federal agents swarmed into the living area, badges displayed. I scrambled to my feet, hands shaking with a dizzying cocktail of relief and mortal terror. One semi-automatic sidearm swung in my direction before steadying inches from my face. "Cora Manchester," the lead agent barked, "we have an authorized warrant for your protective custody." As his compatriots slapped tactical cuffs on my bewildered husband, Declan wheeled on me with feral hatred contorting his features. "You lying, traitorous wench," he bellowed, spittle flying as the agents wrenched his arms behind his back. "After everything I've done for this family, this is how you repay me?" The rage and humiliation radiating from him in scathing waves should have paralyzed me. But as my gaze met Elise's terrified one peering from around the staircase corner, only one Schlina overwhelmed every primal instinct: protection. I had to see this through for her sake. Drawing a fortifying breath, I steadied my nerves under Declan's smoldering glare. "What you've done for us? Your fraud and criminality cost us any ounce of a real family. You deluded animal. Just be grateful I've only seen that you face justice and not a bullet." With that, I lifted my manacled wrists and allowed the agents to lead me towards the phalanx of federal SUVs idling outside, retribution's resounding thunder finally exorcising the tyranny festering under my own roof. As the FBI convoy roared away from the curb, sirens wailing, I clutched Elise's trembling form against me in the back of the armored SUV. My little girl's cheeks glistened with terrified tears, her tiny hands fisting my sweater like a lifeline. "It's okay, baby," I murmured into her soft auburn hair, struggling to modulate my own ragged breaths. "Daddy can't hurt us anymore." The words felt bizarrely hollow, despite the iron truth of the sentiment. After so many weeks languishing under Declan's escalating reign of terror, the very notion of freedom seemed utterly paradoxical. No sooner had the thought materialized than a cacophonous explosion detonated a few blocks away, the shockwave rocking our vehicle like a skipping stone. I instinctively smothered Elise's tiny frame against me as smoke and debris billowed into view through the SUV's tinted windows. "All units be advised, we have shots fired!" One of the agents barked into his radio, his jaw clenching. "The target's residence has been hit with an incendiary device." My heart plummeted in concert with the acrid smoke billowing from the fresh scene of devastation. The house. Our home. Declan. Before I could voice the kaleidoscope of questions rocketing through my psyche, the agent's radio squawked again with a strained voice. "This is Stryker Unit, requesting immediate backup. We are taking sustained automatic fire from unknown shooters inside the house. The bomb squad and HRT need to roll out immediately." Elise's piercing wail cut through the tactical chatter as more thunderous detonations shook our vehicle like a rag doll amid the maelstrom. Though every parental instinct demanded I provide soothing affirmations, I could only gaze on in numb shock at the surreal tableau of fire and violence erupting around us. Declan's true depravity knew no bounds. Rather than face the consequences of his actions, he would indiscriminately slaughter anyone and anything in his path. Before my scattered thoughts could fully coalesce, a hissed order crackled over the radio for our transport team to peel away from the burgeoning war zone. The engine roared back to life as the SUV executed an armored reversal and peeled away at breakneck speed with an earth-shuddering squeal of reinforced tires. Metal barricades and concrete jersey walls whipped past the windows in a sickening blur as we careened away from the deafening violence. Still, I could not tear my eyes from the carnage painting itself across the horizon in shades of fire and smoke, all born from the choices of a single monstrous man. A husband and father who so blithely incinerated the laws of man and God to assuage his own hubris. When the tremors battering our vehicle finally subsided, one of the agents slumped back against the reinforced partition with a ragged sigh. Christ on a cracker, they weren't kidding that this guy was batshit crazy. He cast a sidelong look at Elise and me, bundled together on the bench seat. "Sorry about that, kid. Your daddy clearly has some real problems keeping his business clean." Before I could unleash the torrent of outrage and venom simmering beneath my skin, Elise peered up at me with those saucer-wide amber eyes, seeming to plead through her torrent of tears. Throat aching, I forced down the growling invectives clamoring for release and simply pulled her trembling little body tighter against my own. The rest of the drive passed in a blur of shouted orders and screeching vehicular cavalcades, speeding in all directions. At some point, reinforced assault vehicles joined our armored caravan, heavily armed HRT officers clinging to the rumbling transports like grim-faced gargoyles. As our path curved towards the heart of an auxiliary command staging area, it became abundantly clear how catastrophic Declan's violent unraveling had become. Choppers swarmed overhead, hovering floodlights bleaching the ground in clinical white, while robotic drones flickered through the air like mechanized insects. The SUV finally rolled to a shuddering stop as our doors were wrenched open from outside, figures clad in tactical gear efficiently ushering us into the subterranean refuge beneath the staging area. Weaving through prefab command modules and field terminals glowing with encrypted data, a towering silhouette from the bustle to greet our bedraggled party. Agent Vanover, the grizzled woman in a sharp-dressed suit intoned by way of greeting, those pale eyes boring into me with unsettling intensity. "I see, Mr. Manchester's threats weren't just saber-rattling after all." Before I could respond, her gaze drifted down to take in Elise's hunched, quivering posture. "My God," she breathed, something like genuine pity creasing her stern features. "That poor child." It was a simple reaction, yet those 3 syllables detonated the dam of pent-up emotion, trauma, and sheer, unadulterated relief within me in a torrent of throat-cleaving sobs. I'm not sure whether it was Elise's broken whimpers or my own gulping gasps for air that finally breached the berserker fog of terror and rage and shame clogging my mind. All I knew was that in that singular crystalline moment, every last ounce of fear evaporated in the presence of human compassion and the promise of justice. Whatever blood toll awaited back at our former home, whatever unspeakable price the demons of Declan's reckoning would extract, we would survive this crucible. More importantly, my little girl was finally safe from her father's maniacal shadow once and for all. In the aftermath of Declan's explosive unraveling, our lives were upended in more ways than I could have envisioned. In addition to the charred husk of our former home, every asset my husband had illicitly amassed over his criminal career was seized. Offshore accounts drained, property deeds reclaimed, even the luxury SUV impounded as criminal evidence. Not that I mourned any of those ill-gotten trappings. If rebuilding from scratch was the penance for untangling myself from Declan's poisonous web, I would gladly pay it 1,000,000 times over. What did gut me like a bayonet thrust was the collateral fallout for Elise. My sweet baby girl, already bearing scars far too deep for her tender years, now had her innocence compounded by the trauma of witnessing such violence and depravity. Those first few nights alone together in the Spartan safe house, I would jolt awake in cold sweats to her muffled sobs from the adjoining room. Each time I would gather her up in my arms, rocking her gently as she unleashed the torrent of fear and bewilderment in rambling pleas to make the monsters go away. It shattered my heart into shards to see her so petrified, so unmoored from any sense of security I had failed so catastrophically to provide. All I could do was swathe her in my embrace and murmur soothing mantras about the darkness passing, about brighter days peeking over the horizon. In those first turbulent weeks, I shunned all inquiries about media appearances or interviews regarding Declan's high-profile crimes. The DA could bloviate all she wanted at press conferences, decrying his unforgivable violations and staggering breach of public trust. In my book, the only part that mattered was that he was off the streets, remanded to federal custody to fester in his own savagery. What did consume my every waking moment was ensuring the return of any funds or assets he had covertly drained or transferred from my own accounts during our domestic hostage situation. Armed with the documentation of his malfeasance, it took numerous court dates, but eventually the money he had so maliciously stripped from me was returned in full. Not that I had any intention of replicating our formerly opulent lifestyle. The first call I made after replenishing my finances was to my older sister down in Richmond, asking if she could watch Elise for a few weeks while I took care of some personal affairs. When my rental car finally rolled up the gravel drive to our childhood home, the old cabin appeared just as ramshackle and weather-beaten as it had in my youth. Roof shingles askew, the wrapped porch slightly sagging in places. Yet the mere sight of those familiar angles untouched by Declan's darkness had hot tears misting my eyes. My father had been adamant about never selling this rustic mountain retreat, his personal Eden far from the trappings of the material world. Though only large enough for a simple 2 bedrooms, the property encompassed nearly 100 wooded acres, plenty of open space for 2 lost souls in desperate need of healing and sanctuary. Over the following year, I channeled every ounce of personal revenue into restoring the ramshackle cabin and its surrounding land. It wasn't merely a renovation in the structural sense, but an active exorcism of the toxicity and despair that had threatened to subsume my very existence back in the city. With each newly installed window overlooking the gently rolling hills and sycamore groves, I could feel layers of psychic grime slowing away. Every fresh coat of sun-bleached paint helped cauterize the mental and emotional lacerations inflicted by my monstrous former partner's madness. And with each lilting brook babbling gently nearby, and every chorus of cicadas trilling beneath the star-speckled canopy at night, I could sense Elise's spirit regaining its resiliency in aching increments. Her initial night terrors gradually subsided, replaced with restorative slumbers that left her bounding through wildflower fields each new morning with a renewed spark of innocent mirth. By the time the cabin and surrounding acreage had been fully rehabilitated, my own sense of shattered self finally began to knit itself back together as well. I was no longer the brittle, gasping shell of a woman torn asunder by deception and psychological warfare. Nor was I some brazen victim raging incessantly for retribution, thirsting for Declan's eternal suffering. In a very real sense, I was reborn from the smoldering ashes of my former life. Tempered in the purifying fires of adversity, I had been forged into a resilient new alloy, a protective, nurturing force for the preservation of my family and our hard-won serenity. It took another 6 months before I was able to share my full story with victim advocacy groups and law enforcement associations, aiming to pierce the pernicious silence surrounding financial abuse and coercive domestic partnerships. Where others still shrank from confronting these shadowed social cancers, Elise and I strode forward as beacons of survival and empowerment, living testaments to the regenerative capacity of the human spirit. While the generational trauma inflicted upon my little girl can never be fully expunged, I remain resolute that her path will remain unshackled by the oppressive chains of her father's monumental moral failures. Where Declan committed his life to the pursuit of vapid corporeal riches, Elise will only know richness of character and resilience. And each time I gaze out over the dusky rolling hillsides from our little cabin's porch, breathing in the piney embrace of our hard-won freedom, I know we have both discovered the true treasures worth safeguarding: family, refuge, and the invincible fortitude to prevail over even the darkest, most insidious transgressions. The moment I pulled out that unmarked envelope from the pile of mail, a chill ran down my spine. There was no return address, just my name scrawled in an unfamiliar handwriting. My instincts told me to ignore it, to toss it aside like any other piece of junk mail, but something compelled me to slip a finger under the flap and tear it open. "Your husband is lying to you." Those 5 words hit me like a freight train. My heart pounded as I unfolded the letter with shaking hands. More accusations leapt off the page. Details about Dexter's supposed infidelity, claims about secret meetings and hotel rendezvous. "Wake up, Renata. The truth is closer than you think." I wanted to believe this was all some cruel prank. But then my eyes landed on the phone, tucked into the envelope, a blurry image of Dexter embracing another woman. My mind whirled as I studied every pixel, desperately looking for an explanation, something to disprove what I was seeing. "Oh my God, what is this?" Dexter's voice made me jump. I spun around, the letter crinkling in my tightened grip. He had just walked through the front door after another late night at his tech startup. His eyes widened when he saw what was in my hands. "It's nothing, just some stupid joke mail," I lied, my voice trembling. He reached for the letter, but I pulled it away protectively. "Let me see." I said, "It's nothing." I snapped. A dozen emotions battled within me: shock, disbelief, anger, but mostly a nagging fear that there may be some truth behind these horrific accusations. Dexter's brow furrowed with concern. "Renata, you know I would never cheat on you. After everything we've been through together, how could you even think that?" My mind rewound to the struggles we'd endured over the years, the miscarriages, the financial hardships, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, questioning if we'd ever catch a break. Through it all, Dexter had been my rock, my shelter against the cruel world. "You're right," I whispered, forcing a nod. I'm overreacting." He pulled me into a reassuring embrace, his familiar warmth providing a momentary blanket of comfort. But I couldn't shake the feeling that things had somehow shifted between us. As I hugged him back, something felt off. That night, long after Dexter had fallen asleep, I stared at the crinkled letter and grainy photo on my nightstand. My husband, my loving, loyal husband whom I'd trusted without question, looked like a complete stranger in that damning image. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Over the next few weeks, I became a master of deception. I watched Dexter's every move, studiously cataloging any suspicious behavior while putting on an Oscar-worthy act that everything was normal. And there was plenty that seemed off. The long hours at his startup began stretching into the late evenings and weekends. He started placing his phone face down whenever I entered the room, quickly minimizing whatever was on the screen. And then there were the random phone calls he'd take in hushed tones, retreating to another room for privacy. "Everything okay?" I'd ask when he returned, playing dumb. "Yeah, just work stuff," he'd mutter dismissively. On the nights he did make it home for dinner, Dexter seemed distracted, his mind clearly elsewhere. I'd watch him from across the table, studying the man I used to know like the back of my hand, now a complete enigma to me. One night, after another of his extended Saturdays at the office, enough was enough. As Dexter slipped out the front door yet again, I grabbed my coat and followed a safe distance behind. I tailed him through downtown, watching as he met up with a slim brunette outside a trendy bar. She greeted him with a tight hug and a kiss on the lips. My heart shattered into a million pieces. So it was true. The letter, the rumors, all of it. Dexter, my husband of 8 years, the one man I thought I could trust without doubt, was lying to me. And not just with his words, but with his body too. I wanted to confront them both right then and there, to rush up and unleash the unbridled fury and anguish consuming me from the inside out. But I didn't. I watched, seething in silence, as Dexter and his mistress slipped inside the bar hand in hand. Something inside me had snapped. The veil of blissful ignorance had been brutally torn away. My faith, my love, my life with Dexter, all built on lies. When he finally skulked home in the early morning hours, I was waiting. My face a stoic mask, the letter clutched in my hand. "Where were you?" I asked, point blank. Dexter looked caught off guard, like a kid with his hand trapped in the cookie jar. "I told you I had to work late at." "Don't lie to me." I hurled the crumpled letter at his feet. "I know about the woman. I saw you with her." A smirk crept across his lips, one I didn't recognize, like he had been waiting for this very moment. "So you finally figured it out, about damn time." My palm connected with his cheek before I could stop it. But Dexter didn't even flinch, that same smug look plastered across his face. "Who is she?" I demanded through gritted teeth. "How long has this been going on? Does it really matter?" He gave a casual shrug. "You know why people cheat, Renata? Because they've given up. On their partner, on the relationship, on themselves." His cruel words sliced me to the core. The man I loved was gone, replaced by this vile, unrecognizable monster. "You're right," I said, struggling to maintain my composure. "I did give up. On you." Turning on my heel, I stormed off to the guest bedroom and slammed the door behind me. The hurt and anger was like a raging inferno inside me now. But I wouldn't let it consume me. Not yet. I would harness that fire, let it fuel my determination, my hatred. And then, once I had the truth, the whole truth, I would take everything away from Dexter Wade. He thought he had given up on me. Well, now the gloves were off, and he was about to see how that mistake would cost him everything. "You're being ridiculous," Dexter scoffed, throwing his hands up dismissively. "This is all just a misunderstanding." I glared at him, clutching the damning letter in my trembling hands. "A misunderstanding? You were caught red-handed with another woman." "I can explain." "Explain what?" I snapped. "How you've been lying to me for God knows how long, how you betrayed my trust in the most unforgivable way." Dexter opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. "No, I don't want to hear any more of your pathetic excuses." His expression hardened into that infuriatingly smug look I had come to loathe. In that moment, he was a total stranger to me, worlds apart from the caring, devoted husband I thought I had married. "You're overreacting," he said coldly. "Women always do with these things." I recoiled like I'd been slapped. "What did you just say to me?" Dexter simply shrugged, seemingly relishing my shock and outrage. It was like he was baiting me, poking the bear just to get a reaction. Well, two could play at that game. If he wanted to match wits and see who could stoop lower, I would oblige him. Mustering all my strength, I finally regained my voice. "You're right, you deserve a chance to explain yourself." I forced a sickly sweet smile. "Starting with why you've been deleting all your messages with this woman." Dexter visibly tensed up at my implication of having proof. Good, let him squirm for once. "You've been going through my phone?" His cheeks flushed red with anger. I nodded innocently. "Among other things." Holding up a hand, I started ticking off examples. Having your car tracked, logging into your email, checking your credit card statements. His jaw clenched and those telltale veins bulged in his neck, the dead giveaway that he was enraged. Still, Dexter tried his best to appear calm and in control. "You've completely lost it, do you know that? This obsessive jealousy, it's unhealthy." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Jealousy? That's just the latest in your sad litany of excuses, isn't it?" My voice dripped with venom as I took a step closer, glaring right into his traitorous eyes. "The truth is, I know everything, Dexter. I have evidence of your affair with Marla Jennings. All your emails, text messages, credit card statements for your dirty little hotel hookups. I paused to let that bombshell sink in before delivering the killing blow. Hell, I even made copies of the disgusting selfies you two would send each other. The blood drained from Dexter's face as the truth of my words hit him. Gone was his arrogance, his feigned superiority. He shrank back, finally realizing he was naked and exposed. How? Was all he could choke out. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? I gave a harsh, humorless laugh. That I wouldn't fight for the life you ripped apart? That familiar vein in his neck throbbed furiously now. I could practically see the gears turning, his mind scrambling for an escape hatch, any excuse, any lie that might spare him from the reckoning he deserved. But it was too damn late. You made your bed, Dexter, I growled, feeling a small sense of victory at holding all the cards for once. No more lies, no more deceptions. It's time to face the consequences. I turned and stormed out of the room before he could utter another word of protest. Let him sit and stew in his guilt and shame for once. From here on out, I made the rules. I would dictate every calculated move, and Dexter would soon realize that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. The words burned like acid as they left my mouth. Marla Jennings? You've been sleeping with Marla? My so-called friend visibly recoiled, her face drained of all color. I knew I had her cornered. The evidence was irrefutable. Renata, I don't know what to say. Marla's voice trembled as tears welled up in her eyes. A flicker of pity flashed through me before being promptly extinguished by my burning rage. Don't bother. I shoved a manila envelope into her hands, printouts of emails, texts, and other proof of her torrid affair with my husband. The truth is all right here, in breathtaking detail. The lies, the deception, the hotel receipts. My lip curled with disgust. Oh, and my personal favorite, those X-rated selfies you two would send each other. Real classy stuff. Shame and mortification washed over Marla's face as she feebly thumbed through the incriminating evidence. She opened and closed her mouth wordlessly, any excuse or justification catching in her throat. I could have taken some satisfaction in her discomfort and humiliation. But in that moment, I only felt a slicing betrayal, not just from Dexter, but from someone I considered practically a sister. We shared everything, from joys and heartbreaks to hopes and dreams for the future. And yet she had zero qualms about backstabbing me in the most unforgivable way. So much for loyalty. So much for our friendship meaning anything. How could you do this to me? I demanded through clenched teeth, fighting back hot tears of hurt and fury. After everything we've been through together, everything I confided in you about my struggles with Dexter. Marla swallowed hard, her expression an uncomfortable blend of shame and defiance. I never meant to hurt you, Renata. You have to believe me. Bullshit. The harshness of my own voice startled me. That's exactly what you intended to do, sneaking around behind my back, spreading your legs for my husband. It's not like that, she shot back, a sudden fire in her eyes. I love Dexter. He loves me. We made a real connection, something you couldn't understand. I recoiled, feeling like I'd been physically struck. A real connection? You're delusional. Marla shook her head adamantly. Dexter wanted to leave you. He told me all about your failing marriage and how miserable he was. He pursued me from the start. Of course he did. It was all becoming disgustingly clear now. Dexter's modus operandi of lies, deception, and avoidance of taking any responsibility. Marla was just another smoking gun in his trail of shattered trust and broken vows. Don't kid yourself, I spat. My husband is a coward and a pathological liar. It's all he knows. He manipulated you just as easily as he manipulated me. Tears streamed down Marla's face, smearing her makeup into an ugly mess. A sick part of me relished the sight. You're wrong, she croaked out weakly. We have something real. He loves me. The desperate, hollow look in her eyes confirmed my suspicions. She was nothing more than Dexter's latest victim, another conquest willingly ensnared by his false promises and smooth-talking mind games. Marla was pathetic. But Dexter, he was the true monster I needed to stop. Without another word, I pivoted and stormed away, my mind already strategizing the most fitting retribution. An eye for an eye, that's what he would get. And once this was all over, Dexter would finally understand the bone anguish and humiliation he put me through. I would return that pain tenfold. The fury blazed within me, consuming any mercy or sympathy I once might have felt. Dexter had demolished everything, my love, my trust, and the future we had planned together. Now it was my turn to watch everything he cared about go up in glorious, well-deserved flames. I paced back and forth in my living room, hands trembling as I clutched the damning evidence of Dexter and Marla's affair. My mind was racing, formulating a plan to make them pay for their unforgivable betrayal. Exposing their sordid secrets wouldn't be enough. I wanted complete and utter devastation, to obliterate everything they'd worked towards, to leave them as empty and hollow as I felt. A delicious vengeance, retribution for the agonizing pain they'd put me through. With each calculated step, the scheme took shape. I'd strike fast and without mercy. Let the shockwave ripple through our entire social circle and professional networks. By the time I was done, Dexter and Marla's lives would be in smoking ruins. My phone buzzed, jarring me from my revenge-addled thoughts. A text from Dexter. "We need to talk." I smirked, picturing the desperation consuming him now that I finally held all the cards. Let him sweat it out a little longer. Several hours passed before I finally responded with 2 simple words. "Your office." When I arrived at Dexter's sleek tech startup, his assistant gave me an uneasy look but didn't protest as I breezed past her desk and into his corner office. He was hunched over his laptop, pinching the bridge of his nose like a man grappling with the weight of the world. "This is a professional environment," I announced coolly, making sure my voice carried. "So let's keep things professional, shall we?" Dexter flinched, clearly not expecting my detached bravado. When our eyes met, the pathetic resignation on his face almost made me smirk. Almost. "How could you do this to me?" His words were laced with quiet anguish. "To our marriage?" I arched an eyebrow incredulously. "Are you seriously asking me that question, after everything you've done?" "I never meant to hurt you," Dexter pleaded, attempting one of his charm offensives. But the act held no sway over me, not anymore. Things just got out of hand with Marla. Before I knew it, I was in too deep. Too deep. I fought back a scathing laugh at his paper-thin excuses. "You don't get to play the victim here, not after you systematically destroyed my ability to trust." My voice dripped with disdain. "Secrets, lies, cheating. That's all you know how to do, isn't it?" Pain flashed across his features, my verbal blows clearly landing. "Good. I made a mistake," he conceded hoarsely. "A horrible, unforgivable mistake. But you have to believe I never stopped loving you, Renata. You're everything to me." He reached across the desk in a pleading gesture, but I instinctively recoiled from his grasp like it was a venomous snake. "Save it," I hissed. "Your silver tongue stopped working on me a long time ago." This time, Dexter didn't try to mask the hurt etched across his face. He swallowed hard, seeming to accept that there was no coming back from this, no smooth talking his way out of the devastation he'd caused. And I was just getting started. "You want to know how this is going to play out?" I asked, keeping my tone, untarnished detachment. "First, I'm going to take this evidence of your affair with Marla." I tossed the manila envelope onto his desk with a dull thud. "And I'm going to share it with everyone. Our friends, your investors, current and prospective clients, the whole damn world if I have to." "And then?" he croaked out, eyes swimming with apprehensive dread. A slow, sinister smile crept across my lips. "Then you can kiss everything goodbye. Your company, your reputation, whatever sad delusions of happiness you had with Marla. All of it. You won't have a goddamn thing left to your name when I'm finished with you." Silence hung heavy over the room as Dexter absorbed the crushing weight of my vowed promise. His mouth opened and closed wordlessly like a fish gasping for air. I held his gaze unflinchingly, drinking in every agonizing moment as the first droplets of my vengeance began raining down upon him. "See you around," I muttered coolly, turning on my heel to leave. Or maybe not. The party was in full swing by the time I arrived, fashionably late. Laughter and the clink of champagne glasses filled the air as Dexter's friends and business associates mingled around the modern event space. I scanned the crowd until my eyes found my soon-to-be ex-husband holding court near the bar with his latest fling, Marla, draped all over him. They made for a perfectly punchable portrait of arrogance and entitlement, blissfully unaware of the reckoning that was coming. Taking a fortifying breath, I smoothed out the front of my red dress, chosen specifically for the occasion. like crimson battle armor, striking and unignorable. This was my moment, after all. I crossed the sleek concrete floor with purposeful strides, briefly catching the eye of Dexter's assistant, Kelly. Her expression glazed over with trepidation, no doubt sensing the storm brewing behind my eyes. Smart girl. Renata, you made it! A fake, toothy grin stretched across Dexter's face as he lifted his glass towards me. We were starting to wonder if you'd show. And miss your big night? I matched his artificial cheeriness, turning it back on him with sickening sweetness. Wouldn't dream of it, dear. Marla's owlish gaze bounced back and forth between us like a spectator at a tennis match. I could practically see the worry gnawing away at her. The two of us making niceties through gritted teeth, the tension crackling like lightning about to strike. A small crowd had begun to gather around us, their interest clearly piqued by Dexter and I's impromptu reunion. Let them ogle and gossip like the privileged vultures they were. Their morbid curiosity was about to be satisfied. Well, I proclaimed loudly, forcing an exaggerated smile as I scanned the rapt faces surrounding us, I actually have a bit of an announcement to make. Dexter's bravado faltered as our eyes met again. My cold stare sent an unmistakable message that whatever came next would not be good. At least, not for him or his lover. Reaching into my clutch, I retrieved the sealed manila envelope that had been burning a hole through my purse lining for weeks. I held it aloft, letting everyone take in the suspicious package. You see, my dearest husband here has been keeping a few secrets. I paused to allow the confused murmurs to swell briefly before continuing. Intimate secrets he's been sharing with a very close friend. Half the room seemed oblivious while the other tensed, sensing the impending bombshell about to detonate in their midst. Dexter turned toward me with panic smeared across his features, any plea for mercy dying on his lips. No mercy would be shown this night. With a series of loud rips, I tore open the envelope and began pulling out its contents. Page after page of incriminating evidence of Dexter's torrid affair with Marla. Explicit text exchanges, scandalous photos, travel records, and receipts from their tawdry trysts. You see, while I've been home picking out baby names, Dexter's been picking out baby makers, I declared in a booming voice. And wouldn't you know, he chose the brightest bulb from our inner circle to stick it to. I threw the final few photos into the air, letting them flutter down like confetti across the speechless crowd and their horrified faces. Marla let out a strangled sob, frantically grasping at Dexter, as if he could somehow shield her from the nuclear fallout she'd been complicit in creating. "You lying son of a bitch!" someone shouted in disbelief. The catcalls and mutters of disgust rolled through the stunned audience like a tidal wave. I stood there, back straight and chin high, reveling in the carnage as Dexter's world burned all around him. Finally, after weeks of meticulous planning, my revenge was complete. Spinning on my heel, I strode away from the wreckage, casting one last look over my shoulder at Dexter. The hollowed, haunted expression carving his features nearly made me crack a smile. I had warned him about the consequences of betraying me. Now he got to witness the pulverizing aftermath up close. Let him choke on the ashes of everything he'd so arrogantly squandered. His business, his status, his future with that two-faced snake Marla. It was all gone, vanished in a single glorious gasper. As for me, I was free, untethered from years of torment and anguish. Finally, at long last, the shackles of Dexter Walsh's lies had been undone. It was time to let the healing begin. The fallout was swift and merciless, exactly as I'd envisioned. Within days, the collapse of Dexter's carefully cultivated life was splattered across every gossip rag and tech blog in Seattle. The disgraced CEO, felled by his own tawdry affair and web of deceit that came unspooled so publicly. Good. Let them run those scandalous pictures and seedy text exchanges on a continuous loop for all I cared. The more reputational damage inflicted on Dexter, the better. Across town, the lawyers were circling like sharks, each enabler and business associate looking to distance themselves from the implosion of Dexter's startup. Major investors pulled funding. Longtime partners cut ties. In a matter of days, everything he'd spent years building disintegrated into a smoldering ruin of hubris and betrayal. I'd orchestrated the perfect demolition, the ultimate retribution against the man who had so callously tormented me with lies and infidelity for far too long. With each ticking update of Dexter's downward spiral, A grim smile crept across my lips. This was the justice I'd hungered for from that first vicious sting of betrayal. To see him stripped bare of every ill-gotten gain, every shred of arrogance and self-importance dismantled along with his sordid, depraved legacy. The real gut punch, though, came from the most unlikely of sources. Dexter's mistress turned accomplice in his own destruction. Marla had been uncharacteristically silent in the days following my explosive reveal, no doubt licking her wounds and grappling with the seismic embarrassment of her home-wrecking ways being thrust into the harsh spotlight. Once the initial shock faded, however, her near-feral self-preservation instincts kicked in. I was alerted of her publicity tour by a string of frantic texts from Dexter, each one more pathetic than the last. "She's lying. Everything Marla's saying, it's all lies. You have to stop her, Renata. She's out for blood." "I never wanted to hurt you. You were my world." I barely made it through his sniveling pleas before hurling my phone against the wall, cackling at his feeble, desperate attempts at salvaging what minuscule scraps of dignity he had left. Flipping on the TV, I was greeted by Marla's smug face on the screen, that familiar, self-satisfied sneer sketched across her features. The had certainly grown a pair now that the opportunity for vengeance had arisen. "Dexter made a lot of promises to me about leaving his wife and starting a new life together," she proclaimed to the salivating reporter. "He laid it on thick, talking about soulmates and true loves conquering all that garbage." I rolled my eyes at the cloying sentiment, knowing full well the slimy game Dexter played. He'd mastered the art of telling women exactly what they wanted to hear in order to get what he desired. "But it was all a ploy, you see," Marla continued. "Standard operating procedure for Dexter Walsh. The lies, the manipulation, the complete lack of conscience when it came to using people to get what he wanted." On the screen, she held up a sheaf of papers and photos that looked disturbingly similar to the package I'd used to expose their affair. "I have proof here of Dexter's countless indiscretions, records of the hotels, the emails, all the sordid details of how he betrayed his wife and took advantage of me. He's a selfish, dishonest coward who only cares about himself." The searing diatribe set my soul ablaze, every word piercing through me like a vindicating dagger's caress. At last, someone else could see and acknowledge Dexter for the venomous serpent he truly was. I leaned back and soaked in every lashing second of it. On the TV, Marla's face was contorted into a mask of white-hot fury, utterly unrestrained in her quest to obliterate whatever feeble existence Dexter may have reassembled. He'd played with fire one too many times, scorching both of us in ways that could never be forgiven nor forgotten. Now the burner was getting burned. A lifetime of transgressions finally catching up in one cataclysmic inferno of consequences. And I had a front-row seat to witness every glorious, well-deserved flame. "You've turned into something unrecognizable." Dexter's words hung heavy in the air, more indictment than observation. His eyes bored into me with a searing intensity, as if he could somehow will me into feeling an ounce of remorse or shame. I simply shrugged, impervious to his desperate pleas for absolution. "Maybe I'm just done playing the meek, subservient wife you thought you could walk all over." His face contorted with that all-too-familiar mix of rage and indignation. "Is that what you think? That I looked down on you, treated you like some second-class citizen?" Rolling my eyes, I shot back without missing a beat. "Your actions spoke louder than any of your lies or hollow apologies ever could, Dexter. You don't get to be the victim here, not after everything you put me through." He opened his mouth to protest again, but I silenced him with a raised hand. "Save it. I'm done caring about your justifications or what delusions you've cooked up to absolve yourself of guilt." My voice was a razor's edge, daring him to challenge me further. "The papers have been signed, the given. It's over." Dexter's shoulders slumped in defeat. In that moment, he looked every bit the haunted, broken husk of a man his actions had reduced him to. Good. Let him marinate in the consequences he so richly deserved. I turned on my heel, leaving him to stew in the wreckage of his ruined life. Outside, the crisp spring air filled my lungs, reinvigorating and purifying with each deep breath. After months of anguish and despair, the shackles had finally been cast off. Dexter no longer had any hold over me or the power to inflict any more damage. His humiliating downfall and loss of reputation were the ultimate form of recompense, a scorching case of karma come full circle. In the coming days and weeks, I focused on rebuilding, renovating the house to depict my fresh start, cleansing every last remnant of Dexter's stain from the home we'd once shared. Our twisted marriage had been corrosive, near fatal to my sense of self-worth and identity. But now, alone and unshackled by his toxic influence, I was reclaiming it all. My friends and family rallied around me, offering sympathies and support, though I waved them off with polite yet firm dismissals. I didn't need their pity. What I'd done was an act of self-preservation, a protective right to purge myself of Dexter's miasmic presence in my life once and for all. In time, the calls from reporters and paparazzi grew less frequent as my role in Dexter's spectacular downfall became old news, eclipsed by fresh scandals and salacious stories. My name faded from the spotlight just as I preferred it, quietly, anonymously receding into the background as an unassuming graphic designer once again. Dexter, on the other hand, would never have that privilege, not after the way his personal depravities had been laid startlingly bare before the world. Disgraced, destitute, and most unforgivably alone. Deserted by his fair-weather friends and opportunistic leeches the moment his status and wealth evaporated. Only Marla remained, and even her continued involvement was undoubtedly self-serving, a final act of vengeance before disappearing into oblivion as well. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I received a letter, an unsigned, handwritten plea for forgiveness and understanding. Even without a name attached, I recognized Dexter's distinctive scrawl immediately, that same elegant penmanship which had once professed eternal devotion and fidelity, until his pretty words curdled into lies and infidelity. I didn't bother opening the letter, merely tossed it into the crackling fireplace and watched the pages curl and blacken as the carefully inked epithets turned to ashes. No more words, rationalizations, or empty promises. Dexter had gambled everything for his tawdry indiscretions, and the house had folded around him. He was the architect of his own devastation and karmic reckoning. All that was left for me was to let the purifying flames run their course, scouring away the last vestiges of his poisonous influence over me. From those smoldering embers I would be born anew, emboldened, resilient, and finally free. The rest of my life was awaiting, full of infinite possibilities, uncompromised by Dexter's shadow, and I had no intentions of looking back any longer. The jarring ring of my cell phone shattered the quiet calm of our living room. I glanced at the caller ID and felt a knot form in my stomach. Ely, my brother-in-law. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Marla, don't play dumb with me," Eli's gruff voice barked through the speaker. "When are you going to pay me back the 60 grand you borrowed?" My eyes widened in disbelief. "What are you talking about? I never borrowed any money from you." "Don't insult me with your lies," he shouted. "Nathan came to me 2 years ago begging for a loan because you two were drowning in debt. He promised he'd pay it all back once he got that big real estate deal." My heart pounded as confusion swirled in my mind. A $60,000 loan? Real estate deal? Why was this the first I was hearing about it? "Ellie, I don't know what you're talking about, but Nathan and I are certainly not drowning in debt. There must be some misunderstanding." A bitter laugh crackled through the phone. "Misunderstanding? You ungrateful." "Don't you dare talk to my wife like that." Nathan's voice startled me as he snatched the phone from my hands. I watched his face contort in anger as he paced back and forth, growling harsh whispers I couldn't make out. The veins bulged from his neck as he argued fiercely with his brother. My mind raced to make sense of Eli's wild accusations. Had Nathan really taken out a massive loan without telling me? And what debt was he talking about? As far as I knew, we were doing fine financially, a little tight with the housing market dip, but nothing unmanageable. Right? Doubt crept in as I replayed the past few months. Nathan's suspiciously long work hours, the hushed phone conversations whenever I entered a room, our dwindling savings that he always blamed on expenses. I shuddered, feeling like I didn't recognize the man I loved anymore. Nathan abruptly ended the call, his face flushed red. He ran his fingers through his hair, letting out a frustrated exhale. "What's going on, Nathan?" I asked, unable to hide the slight tremble in my voice. Did you really take out a loan from Eli? He avoided eye contact, his jaw tightening. It's complicated, but you don't need to worry about it. The hell I don't, I snapped, surprising both of us with my outburst. Eli made it sound like we're drowning in debt, and you've been lying to me about money troubles. Nathan finally met my gaze, his eyes a swirling storm of conflict. Marla, you've got to trust me on this, okay? I'll handle it. I opened my mouth to protest, but he gently placed his finger on my lips, forcing a weak smile. Everything will be fine, I promise. He leaned in and kissed my forehead before grabbing his jacket and keys. Where are you going? Out. He muttered without explanation, heading for the front door. I watched helplessly as he left our home, slamming the door behind him. Doubts and suspicions swirled violently in the pit of my stomach. Who was this person I'd married, and why did I feel like I was surrounded by lies? I spent a restless night, staring at the ceiling, replaying Eli's biting words in my head. A $60,000 loan? How could Nathan have racked up that kind of debt without my knowledge? As the sun peeked through the curtains, I heard the front door creak open. Feigning sleep, I listened to Nathan's heavy footsteps and the muffled thud of his jacket hitting the floor. I rolled over, my eyes catching sight of the weary slump in his shoulders as he entered the bedroom. You're home late, I said flatly. Nathan flinched, clearly not expecting me to be awake. Yeah, had to work overtime on this new property listing. Lies. That's all I'd been hearing from him lately. My jaw clenched as I studied the dark circles under his bloodshot eyes. We need to talk about what Eli said. Marla, it's nothing, he grumbled, avoiding eye contact as he loosened his tie. My idiot brother has never been able to mind his own business. Then explain it to me. I shot back, anger bubbling up. Explain these mysterious debts and a $60,000 loan you apparently took from him behind my back. Nathan whirled around, his eyes flashing with rage. Because it's between me and him, all right? You weren't involved. We're married, Nathan, I shouted, jumping out of bed. When did you decide anything involving that kind of money wouldn't involve me? His face softened slightly as he opened his mouth to respond. But I wasn't finished. And that's not even the worst part, I seethed. The absolute worst is you lying to me this whole damn time. Nathan winced as my words struck a nerve. I haven't been lying. Oh, yeah? I stalked over to the dresser and yanked open the drawer, rifling through it until I found the bank statements. Then how about explaining these? I shoved the documents into his chest, pointing at the dwindling numbers that told a very different story than his everything is fine platitudes. Our savings account is getting drained every month, and you keep telling me it's for bills or expenses for work. My voice cracked with a mix of anger and hurt. What expenses, Nathan? The truth, for once. He stared down at the statements, his jaw clenched tightly. The strangled silence between us was deafening. Finally, he spoke in a hoarse mutter. I got in too deep. There's a big deal I've been working, but it required way more upfront cash than I had. He dragged a hand down his face warily. I took the loan from Eli to cover it, telling him I'd pay him back once I landed this property. And you couldn't tell me any of this because... I folded my arms, raising my eyebrows expectantly. Nathan sighed heavily, plopping down on the edge of the bed. You've been so focused on your career and wanting to start a family soon, I didn't want to disappoint you or add even more stress. My body went rigid as his words washed over me. More lies. Flimsy justifications for keeping me in the dark. Disappointment burned through me like acid. How had the devoted man I fell in love with become such a stranger? I fixed Nathan with a cold stare. Get out! His head snapped up, eyes widening in shock. Marla, wait, please. Get out of my house, I repeated slowly, my voice dripping with venom. I can't even look at you right now. For a beat, Nathan looked like he might protest. But something in my expression must have convinced him otherwise. With slumped shoulders, he silently retrieved his jacket and walked out the door, leaving me alone with my swirling storm of rage and anguish. The deafening silence that filled our home after Nathan left was suffocating. Part of me wanted to believe his lies, to cling to the man I thought I knew. But the gut-wrenching truth hung heavy in the air. My husband had betrayed my trust in the worst way. I slouched on the couch, my head in my hands as I fought back tears. I couldn't keep living oblivious and naive while he squandered our future. It was time to take action. Grabbing my laptop, I logged into our bank accounts, my heart sinking with each new statement I pulled up. The numbers didn't lie. Huge sums were being siphoned out every month into some unknown void. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text notification from Eli. "We need to talk, face to face. I'll swing by this afternoon." I didn't bother responding, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. I spent the next few hours gathering any other evidence of Nathan's deception. Credit card statements, suspicious numbers frequently called from his phone, reports of unusual cash withdrawals from various ATMs. By the time Eli arrived, I was sitting amidst a storm of incriminating paperwork, my mind swirling with anger and disbelief. Eli barged in without knocking, his face set in stern determination. "Marla, He froze, taking in the documents scattered around me. "What is all this?" "Proof," I stated flatly, gesturing for him to sit down on the couch. "Proof that my husband has been lying to me about everything. Money has been disappearing from our accounts for months, maybe even years." As I launched into a detailed recounting of Nathan's excuses and evasions, Eli's expression morphed into seething rage. "That lying sack of shit," he growled, slamming his fist on the coffee table. "So he really took that loan from me under false pretenses?" What was his excuse? Why did he need $60,000 from you?" I demanded. Eli let out a bitter chuckle as he shook his head. "Get this. The moron claimed there was some urgent need for cash to keep your family's real estate business afloat. Spun this whole tale of hitting hard times and needing a bailout." My jaw dropped in disbelief. Our tiny, perpetually struggling real estate startup could barely afford the office rent, let alone require that kind of massive infusion of cash. "You're kidding me," I whispered, anger burning in my chest. I stood abruptly, snatching my keys off the counter. "That's it. I've had enough lying and deception." "Where are you going?" Eli asked as I stormed toward the door. "To get the truth, once and for all," I tossed over my shoulder. "And you're coming with me." Within minutes, we were speeding down the road, my knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel. We didn't exchange any words. Eli could see the tumult of emotion roiling across my face. Finally, we arrived at a dingy pool hall on the edge of town. I'd heard rumors of high-stakes poker games taking place in the back rooms, but never imagined Nathan being involved. I shoved open the doors and marched inside, scanning the dimly lit room with narrowed eyes until I spotted a familiar frame hunched over the billiards table. "Nathan." "You lying piece of shit!" I screamed, causing every head to snap in our direction. Nathan whirled around, his eyes widening in shock and fear. In that moment, I saw the man he truly was, not the partner I devoted my life to, but a selfish coward willing to gamble away everything we'd built. I stormed toward him, Eli hot on my heels as the other patrons shrank back. "You've got some explaining to do, asshole," Eli growled, cracking his knuckles menacingly. "And you better not leave out a single goddamn detail." Nathan opened his mouth, but no words came out. He simply stared back at us, pale and trembling as the walls closed in. The look of sheer terror on Nathan's face should have given me some perverse satisfaction, but as I stood there, fists clenched and chest heaving, all I felt was a hollow ache of betrayal. "Well?" Eli barked, taking a threatening step forward. "You gonna explain yourself, little brother, or am I gonna have to beat it out of you?" Nathan's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. His gaze flickered around the hushed pool hall, seeming to realize there was no escape from this reckoning. I messed up, okay?" he stammered, holding up his hands defensively. "I got caught up in some bad business deals that put me in the hole financially." My eyes narrowed to slits. "So you lied and took $60,000 from your own brother to cover your ass, and then kept lying to me about all of it?" Something flashed in Nathan's eyes. Was it shame? Remorse? I couldn't tell, and quite frankly, I didn't care anymore. "The loan was just supposed to be temporary," he insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "I was going to pay Eli back once this big property deal went through, but things spun out of control." "Out of control?" I scoffed derisively, shaking my head in disgust. "Our bank accounts were getting drained every month from gambling debts, and whatever illegal crap you were pulling in these sleazy underground games." Nathan opened his mouth, but I silenced him with a raised hand. I'd heard enough lies to last a lifetime. Reaching into my purse, I pulled out the thick stack of documents I'd gathered, Statements, histories, and photocopies cataloging Nathan's astounding web of deception. This, I shoved the papers against his chest, my voice trembling with rage, is everything I've uncovered about your disgusting betrayal, every filthy secret, every repulsive lie you told me. With a sinking feeling, Nathan thumbed through the evidence, his face paling as the magnitude of his misdeeds was laid bare. Marla, I can explain. Save it, I spat. I'm done listening to your pathetic excuses. From the corner of my eye, I noticed the other pool hall patrons shifting uncomfortably, wanting no part of this messy confrontation. Good. I wanted them to see the lying, cheating scumbag I'd been married to. Eli stepped up beside me, cracking his knuckles ominously. So what's it gonna be, Nathan? You gonna come clean about how big of a dirtbag you've been? Panic flickered across Nathan's face as he looked between us helplessly. Please, just give me one more chance. I can fix this, I swear! Something inside me snapped at his sniveling pleas. Winding my arm back, I let loose a slap that cracked across his cheek with a resounding smack. You already had your chance, you selfish prick, I shouted, poking him hard in the chest. Now it's time to pay up for every dollar and every lie. Hot tears stung my eyes as I glared at the man I once loved, the person I naively hitched my entire future to. Eli was right. He was a lying sack of shit, not even worthy of being called family. Nathan cradled his reddened cheek, his eyes filled with a childlike fear. The air was thick with tension as we reached an impasse, the ultimatum hanging perilously. Well, Eli growled, flexing his thick arms menacingly. You gonna start talking and make things right? Or do we got a problem here? My heart pounded against my ribs as Nathan's gaze met mine, silently pleading for some shred of mercy or understanding. But there was nothing left to salvage. He was on his own now. Over the next few days, I operated in an enraged haze, making preparation after preparation for the inevitable confrontation. I invited a few of our closest mutual friends over under the pretense of a peacemaking dinner between Nathan and Eli. Little did Nathan know it was the setup for his grand unveiling as a liar and a cheat. When he arrived that evening, looking sheepish and apprehensive, I greeted him with hollow politeness. The others chatted and made small talk over drinks in the living room, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. As dinner commenced, the atmosphere thickened with tension. I noticed beads of sweat forming on Nathan's brow as he kept shooting nervous glances between Eli and me. So, our friend Mark spoke up after an uncomfortable lull. What's really going on here? We all know you two have beef. I exchanged a loaded look with Eli, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Showtime. Clearing my throat, I fixed Nathan with an icy glare. You want to know what's going on? How about we start with Nathan taking out a secret $60,000 loan from Eli? The table fell into stunned silence, all eyes swiveling to Nathan in shock. His face drained of color as he gripped his fork tightly. She's lying, he croaked out, shaking his head vehemently. I never took any loan. In one deft motion, Eli reached into his jacket and slammed a thick manila envelope onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud, scattering utensils. Really, bro? His tone dripped with disdain. Because I've got bank statements, text messages, and a whole damn paper trail showing otherwise. With trembling hands, Eli extracted the stack of documents, letting them flutter out as undeniable proof. My chest tightened as I watched the realization wash over our friends' faces. The confusion, the disbelief, the dawning horror at the depths of Nathan's betrayal. No. Angela, my closest friend, whispered as she stared at the paperwork. How could you, Nathan? Your own family. His expression contorted with panic as he scanned the incriminating evidence surrounding him, the cornered prey with nowhere left to run. It's not what it looks like, I swear, he pleaded, looking around the table desperately. I was going to pay him back. I got in over my head with this real estate deal. Cut the shit, Nathan! Eli roared, slamming his fist on the table and making everyone jump. We all know you've been blowing cash on underground gambling and God knows what else. My heart twisted as hurt flickered across Nathan's face. You told them? I told them the truth, I spat, anger reigniting. The truth about how you've been lying, stealing, and gambling away our future to fund your pathetic addiction. Something dark flickered in Nathan's eyes as his expression hardened. You're one to talk about addiction, Marla. Ever consider you're just a nagging, controlling bitch who can't handle? The crack of my palm across his cheek reverberated through the deathly silent room. A collective gasp rippled from our friends as Nathan cradled his reddened face, pure venom in his glare. "Don't you dare talk to my wife like that, you piece of garbage," Eli snarled, rising to his feet menacingly. The tangy metallic scent of blood filled the air. Whether Nathan's lip was split or from my stinging hand, I couldn't tell. All I knew was my body thrumming with adrenaline and fury as the avalanche finally crashed down. "Get out," I hissed through gritted teeth, unable to even look at Nathan anymore. "Take your shit and get out of my house." For a long, tense moment, Nathan seemed to contemplate digging in, arguing, fighting against the tide. But faced with Eli's imposing figure and our friends' disgusted stares, he had no choice but to slink away in disgrace. One by one, my friends filed out in silence, leaving just Eli and me amid the debris of shattered illusions. As I sank numbly onto the couch, the gravity of what had occurred washed over me in waves. Every duplicitous act, every egregious lie had been laid bare. And yet, rather than the catharsis or relief I expected, all I felt was a bone-deep weariness. Eli squeezed my shoulder gently as I stared off into the distance, unsure what lay ahead. But at least now, the truth was inescapable. The hours and days following that disastrous dinner blurred together in a muddled haze. Nathan made feeble attempts to reconcile, leaving pathetic voicemails and texts that I instantly deleted without listening. I was done being manipulated by his lies. My friends rallied around me, offering steadfast support and shoulders to cry on when the anguish became too much. Angela, in particular, was a rock, spending long nights on my couch as I raged, sobbed, and spilled out the depths of Nathan's deception. "I can't believe I was so blind," I whispered hoarsely one evening, clutching a glass of wine like a lifeline. How could I have not seen what a despicable person he really was? Angela squeezed my hand, her eyes glistening with compassion. "That's what con artists do, Marla. They become experts at hiding their true nature from even those closest to them." I winced at the harsh truth in her words. Con artist? It left a sour taste just thinking about Nathan that way. As the initial shock wore off, red-hot fury consumed me. The pieces were finally falling into place. His constant business trips and odd hours, the drained bank accounts and mounting debts, his panicked desperation when I uncovered the loan from Eli. It was all to cover up his spiraling gambling addiction and illicit activities. When the anger became too overwhelming to contain, Eli was my release valve. We would meet for drinks or hash it out over the phone, raging about what a pathetic, sniveling coward Nathan had become. "He's going to face consequences," Eli growled one night, slamming his fist on the bar with emphasis. "I don't care if I have to take his ass to court and garnish every paycheck. He's going to pay back every last cent with interest." My own demands went even further than just financial restitution. I wanted reparations for the emotional and psychological torture Nathan had put me through. Unbidden images would flash through my mind. Nathan sneaking out at odd hours, him huddled over a smoky poker table surrounded by seedy thugs, blowing our hard-earned money in reckless bets. The enormity of his selfish betrayal made me feel physically ill. I began compiling a case to present to my lawyer, documentation of secretive bank transfers and cash withdrawals, incriminating text messages with his gambling buddies, proof that his ludicrous business expenses were actually losses covered up. With each new discovery, my rage toward Nathan calcified like hardening cement. This was so far beyond simple indiscretions or mistakes. This was a systematic, premeditated campaign of fraud and deception against me, his wife, his supposed loved one. I wanted to ensure Nathan's lies finally caught up with him in the most publicly humiliating way possible. My ambushes continued in front of friends, family, anyone who would witness his hollow, groveling attempts to win me back. I'd calmly present the latest piece of damning evidence, watching his face go bloodless with panic. "Is this the kind of man you want to be defended?" I asked coolly during one such confrontation at Eli's house, holding up bank statements with thousands embezzled. A common criminal who stole from his own family? Nathan opened and closed his mouth like a gasping fish, sweat beading on his brow as our gathered loved ones stared at him in revulsion. I made mistakes. But I can change," he stammered desperately. "We can rebuild the trust. Just give me one more chance." His words trailed off as I fixed him with a look of pure, unbridled disgust. You've had more than enough chances, Nathan. Now it's time to face the consequences of your sickening choices. With trembling hands, Eli produced a bound stack of papers, a comprehensive record of every cent Nathan owed, all the debts and losses totaled into a staggering lump sum. This is your path to making amends, Eli stated, his voice dripping with disdain as he shoved the documents into Nathan's chest. Either you square up and start paying, or I take you to court and legally garnish every dime to your name. An oppressive silence hung in the air, punctuated only by Nathan's shuddering breaths. His eyes darted between Eli, me, and the paperwork, the weight of the ultimatum visibly crushing him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he met my gaze with those same wounded puppy dog eyes that had melted me 1,000 times before. But not this time. Please, he croaked out, a broken, pitiful whisper. I crossed my arms, shaking my head slowly as an adamant chill froze over my expression. You had your chance, I said flatly. It's over. And with that, the last withered vines of love and trust I'd clung to for far too long finally unraveled, leaving only the cold hard truth. Nathan was nothing but a selfish, pathetic liar who deserved to reap the most agonizing consequences for shredding me to pieces. With Eli's steadfast support, I launched a full-scale legal assault against Nathan. No more hollow threats or impassioned rants. It was time to hit him where it hurt most. His wallet. I filed for divorce first, seeking not only a dissolution of our sham marriage, but also compensation for the incredible emotional and financial trauma he'd inflicted. My lawyer was a ruthless barracuda who smelled blood in the water. With the mountain of evidence you've provided, we have a very strong case against your husband for fraud, embezzlement, and gross financial malfeasance, she stated matter-of-factly as we strategized our attack. Before Nathan could so much as blink, the divorce papers were delivered along with the monetary demands, every cent of Eli's original loan, plus additional punitive damages for pain and suffering. Needless to say, Nathan didn't take it well. Are you out of your goddamn mind? He shouted at me during one heated exchange, spittle flying. You're trying to financially cripple me for the rest of my life. I crossed my arms, unmoved by his sputtering outrage. I'm simply pursuing appropriate legal reparations for your egregious betrayals, Nathan. I think I'm more than entitled after you stole from me and destroyed our marriage with your lies. His face mottled red with impotent rage as my words struck a nerve. You self-righteous bitch, like you're so innocent in all this. I'd watch it if I were you, Eli stepped in, shoving his bony finger into Nathan's chest. Keep running that mouth and see how much worse the financial penalties get. Nathan looked ready to swing at his older brother, hands balled into tight fists. But then his shoulders slumped in resignation, maybe finally realizing the futility of his situation. While the divorce proceedings trudged along, Eli and I kept piling on the pressure from every angle. We acquired copies of Nathan's employment file from his real estate broker and gleefully sent the damning documentation to his bosses, records of unexcused absences, documented lies about his whereabouts, even a formal complaint from a client about Nathan's erratic, unprofessional behavior. Within days, the inevitable phone call came. Nathan had been terminated from his job and banned from the premises. One more ruinous consequence for his reckless actions. How's it feel to have your entire life crumbling around you? I asked in a sickly sweet tone after delivering the news in person. Not so fun being on the receiving end of deception, is it? Nathan's face was pallid, his eyes sunken as he stared at me with a potent mix of fear and loathing. You're a sadistic monster, you know that? I shrugged nonchalantly, inspecting my nails. Maybe so, but at least I'm not a pathetic, sniveling liar who torched my own marriage for some cheap gambling thrills. Watching him flinch at my biting words, I felt a twisted sense of wicked satisfaction. For far too long he had gaslit me, controlled the narrative with his manipulations. But now, finally, the all-powerful facade had crumbled away, leaving him weak and powerless. The roles were starkly reversed. Over the ensuing weeks, Nathan couldn't even muster a whimper of protest as heavy garnishments were applied to what little assets and income remained in his name. Insurmountable legal fees mounted as he frantically tried to halt the avalanche, only to be continuously rebuffed. We made sure to extract our proverbial pound of flesh plus interest, calling in every chit and using every underhanded tactic his own duplicity had exposed. Eliciting any mercy would have been useless. We had definitively beaten him into submission, the dying dog too hobbled to bite back. In the end, after liquidating what remained of his rapidly dwindling net worth, we recouped the entirety of Eli's loan amount, plus triple in punitive damages for me. It still wasn't enough to make me feel whole again, but watching Nathan have to grovel and pay his dues was as close to justice as I could realistically hope. As I finally signed the divorce papers, officially severing our toxic union forever, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The worst was over. I had unmasked Nathan's true nature, dragged his sickening con into the harsh light, and ensured he suffered appropriately. While neither of us escaped unscathed, at least I could hold my head high. Nathan was just another disgraced, debt-ridden liar left to rot in the ashes of his own deception. The final decree from the judge sliced through me like a white-hot blade. My marriage was officially over. As I left the stark, sterile confines of the courthouse that day, I couldn't help but feel a strange cocktail of relief and emptiness. Relief that the brutal, dragged-out ordeal with Nathan had finally concluded, but emptiness over the death of the idealistic dreams I had carefully nurtured for so many years. The life I had envisioned, building a home, having children, growing old together, shattered into a million mocking pieces by one man's reprehensible greed and deceit. I gripped the thick sheaf of papers detailing the final divorce judgments, the division of assets heavily in my favor, the monumental punitive damages Nathan was on the hook for, even a strict garnishment of his future earnings to ensure compliance. Tangible evidence of how thoroughly I had dismantled him, the justly earned spoils after our harrowing war. And yet it felt so empty, hollow, like I was a victor standing amongst the rubble and ruin. "You okay?" I glanced up to see Eli studying me with a concerned frown, his brow furrowed. In the aftermath of the prolonged legal battles, he had become an invaluable ally, a tenacious partner willing to go to the trenches to hold Nathan accountable. "Yeah, I'm fine," I replied automatically, plastering on an unconvincing smile. "Just processing everything, you know?" Eli nodded solemnly, seeming to recognize my morose mood. We said little as we made our way to the parking lot, the weighty silence between us laden with unspoken words. As I climbed into my car, getting ready to depart our separate ways, Eli rapped his knuckles on the window. When I rolled it down, his expression was somber, yet resolute. "You did the right thing, Marla," he stated, leaning down to meet my gaze. "I know it doesn't feel like it now, with all the pain and bullshit, but you showed that scumbag the consequences of betraying his family. You held him accountable when no one else could." My throat tightened with emotion as I processed his words, giving a small nod of acknowledgement. Eli squeezed my shoulder bracingly. "It'll get easier from here. You've got your whole life ahead to focus on healing and moving forward. I'm sorry it had to happen this way." With that, he stepped back, offering me one final look of solidarity before turning and walking towards his own vehicle. I watched him go, feeling paradoxically lighter yet more adrift than I had in years. The weeks and months that followed were a harsh sojourn into uncharted territory, rebuilding my life from the ashes, one sobering step at a time. I threw myself headlong into my work, determined to re-establish the parts of my identity that Nathan had slowly leached away through years of gaslighting and control. Little by little, with the help of my support system, I regained my footing and composure. The burden of deceit lifted from my shoulders as I finally allowed myself to breathe freely. Inevitably, updates about Nathan's downward spiral trickled back to me. How he was ensnared in another high-stakes gambling scheme, racking up further debts he had no prayer of repaying. How he was kicked out of his rented apartment and sofa surfing from one friend's place to another. Bitter rants about the psycho bitch ex-wife who ruined his life. Part of me felt a vicious sense of vindication upon hearing those sordid tales. Let the sadistic liar reap the fruits of his actions, sleeping in the bed of consequences he had so meticulously made. But for the most part, I simply felt indifferent. A chapter had closed, cauterized after being ruthlessly extricated from my life like a cancerous growth. In the end, the ultimate revenge was simply moving forward, thriving and finding fulfillment in a life cleansed of Nathan's toxic influence. while he spiraled into the ashen abyss of his own making. I steadily rebuilt piece by piece, year over year. A small smile played across my lips as I signed the mortgage papers for my very own home, a peaceful sanctuary uncompromised by any taint of the past. My sanctuary, the home I would raise a family in one day when the time was right. I was free. The long con had finally concluded, and I had emerged battered yet triumphant, wiser to the ways the sadistic deceivers employ to ensnare their prey. Some day down the line, I thought with grim satisfaction, Nathan would understand the most valuable lesson of all, that betrayal and deception bear a toll that no amount of lies can ever repay, no matter how long the con lasts.